when the Braves won the World Series. They were in Houston. So the Braves opened up the stadium at home in Atlanta to have a watch party. And so the team wasn't actually at home when they won. They were away. Sure. And so we were just like living our best life. But
epic tailgate.
So I was not actually working that night because the Braves were away, and I only worked the home games when I worked for the Braves. And so I was just there with friends who were watching the game, and my boss was like, hey, you're allowed to go to this game if you want, but like if the Braves win the World Series, you've got to be on air the next morning because that's obviously going to be the big story, and like you cannot miss work because you were in Atlanta partying with Braves fans. And I was like, okay, fine. So I end up going to the game. The Braves win. It's midnight. I drive back to Columbus, 2 hours away, go home, shower, get coffee, and back at work at 3 a.m. So I didn't go to sleep that entire night, and then go on the air that morning, like covering all the excitement of the Braves winning the World Series. That was a day that was just, I'll never forget. Like no sleep, going on the air and doing a morning show was just wild.
Welcome back, friends. Today I am in sunny Milwaukee. It's a beautiful day with a news anchor who moved here relatively recently and hasn't even experienced the beautiful summers of Wisconsin yet. Welcome to the show, Blake Eason.
So glad to be here, man. Yeah, you said it best. On a day like today, I am very excited to get outside.
Yeah. So where did you bring me to? What is this place?
So this is 777 apartment complex here in Milwaukee, and clearly the amenity spaces are amazing here.
Yeah, I guess, what's funny is like growing up in Wisconsin, I'm nowhere near this. Like I'm in the other part of the state. And so even as a kid, I didn't for whatever reason, like click that this is like on Lake Michigan.
Right.
Like that Milwaukee was at all. I don't think of it as like a city on the water or Chicago.
Right.
And then I started coming down here and I'm like, oh, this is kind of, I feel like we're on the coast.
Absolutely.
Like this is pretty dope.
When I came here for my job interview back in, I think it was August, I remember I did my boss picked me up from the airport. We drove by the lake, and being from the South, I'm from Georgia. We don't have anything like this. So to me, I jokingly will look at Lake Michigan and I'm like, that's an ocean.
How do all your friends and family feel from way back when, now that you're like a hot shot in a big city? Because you're from a town of what, like 5,000 people or so? Like a really small
town. Yeah. I'm from a town called Warner Robins, Georgia. There's an Air Force base there. It was a great place to grow up. I went to public school throughout my entire childhood. I love my hometown, but it's a small town, and I knew that I wanted to live in a big city one day. And so this is like stop number 4 for me, which I'm sure we'll get into here in a moment. But yeah, I've loved Milwaukee so far. As you mentioned, I haven't experienced summer here yet, so very excited for that.
How do people treat you when you go back home? Do they want to hear all the stories of what the big city and travel is like? Because a lot of people in small towns, and I'm not trying to talk trash about them because I'm from a relatively small town too, just different lifestyle, but a lot of those people don't really travel much.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's awesome to be able to go back home. I mean, my high school, Northside High School, is a place that I always joke and say that I peaked in high school just because my high school experience was just that incredible.
Sure.
I was part of the theater group. We had a really good football team. And the coolest story is our theater department, we actually won the state championship, and then as did our football team. And so it was cool to have a friend group in theater and then also support the football team.
I didn't know there were like state championships for theater.
It was a big deal. It was a big deal. Theater kid for life, troop 2892 forever and always. But yeah, going back home is awesome, and it's cool. Our high school, our senior class, a lot of us actually went off and went to like the big universities across the country, which is cool.
Well, I mean, even in Eau Claire, where I'm from, like I said, it's 90 miles east of Minneapolis. It's a town of like, I think we're just over 70,000 people. So we're not like small. It's in the top 10, size for Wisconsin population city. But even that, it's like everyone I grew up with, we were all like, oh, we got to get to Minneapolis. Or, oh, we got to move to California or New York. Or it's like you feel like you need to get out.
Yep.
And then what happens is a lot of people go to college and either drop out or finish. But either way, they're like, I kind of just want to go right back home.
Right.
Especially if you want to raise a family or everything. It's like hard to do in this type of area. So let's talk about your journey a little bit in what you actually do in media. So I know that while you were in college, you got an internship. This was in Atlanta, I believe, right? At the Burt Show, which is like a nationally syndicated morning show, like a big talk show, right? And you worked with them for a good while. From there, you got a job in Nashville, which I think was doing like I know you did some anchor stuff, but I would assume some of it was like on the street reporting.
Yes.
And then from Nashville, you got your job here.
Yes, there's actually a stop before Nashville. I left the Burt Show, the radio station in Atlanta, to go to Columbus, Georgia, which is a very small town, similar to where I'm from. Typically in media, you have to kind of work your way up through the ecosystem, and typically back in the day, it's changed a little bit now, but typically you would go to a very small market, you would perfect your craft, and then kind of work your way up in market size. So for example, Columbus, Georgia, where I started, was market 128. I think Milwaukee is in the top 30 realm. Nashville was a top 20 market, and so you kind of work your way up in market size as you grow in your career. And so, yeah, when I was in Columbus, I was reporting, I was doing everything. That was COVID. I was covering the coronavirus. But before that, I didn't know that this is what I wanted to do. If we backtrack to 2020, I had sold all of my furniture, and I was preparing to move to Los Angeles to go that route as a television host. I wanted to host a game show one day. Ryan Seacrest was the ultimate role model of mine. And I just was like, you know what? Sell everything, move to LA, go on auditions, and hopefully find a show that just sticks. Well, around that time is when COVID happened. And so nobody was doing castings. Obviously, LA was shut down completely, and our entire business was changing. And so I kind of had my back against the wall, and I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. The only thing that I can think of is local news, because that's what people are turning to more right now, because they just want to understand the state of the world. And so I ended up going to Columbus, Georgia, and did not think that I was going to love local news as much as I did. And it just happened, and I'm very grateful it
was
did.
That before the Burt Show or after?
After the Burt Show. And so all of my friends are looking at me like, dude, you're crazy. Like, you're going to leave this, high profile radio job in Atlanta. It was an incredible experience. And Burt, who's the host of the show, is a big mentor of mine. Yeah. And he was like, dude, if you want to do television, you've got to go do television. This is radio. Radio is not television. And he was like, and you can't expect to start in Atlanta just because that's where you live right now. Atlanta is a top 10 market. And he was like, so a lot of this is going to have to do with you betting on yourself, saying, I'm going to move to this small town where I don't know anybody and try my best to work my way back up to a bigger market one day, if that's what I want to do.
Are there a lot of news reporters that do that, but then end up just getting stuck in these small towns for long periods of time?
Yeah, there's certainly that. And then I think a lot of people eventually get to a place to where they don't want to move anymore. I was telling you, this is my third move in the past 6 years. And I guess if you count moving from Atlanta to Columbus to Nashville to here. Yeah, so 3 moves in 6 years, that's a lot of moving.
Yeah, even for someone without kids, right? But especially if somebody has a family and then they have to have their spouse figure out a job situation, trying to move your kids, it's kind of impossible. So I feel like a lot of people, at least in your position in the earlier part of that type of a career, almost avoid having families, right?
Absolutely.
You don't want to put yourself in a position with that yet because it's not time, which is funny because again, being from a small town, I'm sure you're in the same way where people that we grew up with, I'm a little older than you, but people we grew up with settle down super early.
Yeah.
But you go to big cities and it's if you have kids and you're under 30, it's weird. People wait till they're 35, 40 for kids versus me. I had my first kid when I was 22.
It's just a different way of life,
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, it's one of those things that I've just kind of thought of as I love my job. I love my career. I love what I'm doing. And I think, I'll be 30 next year. And I think there's something in me that's turning now where I'm trying to think about what does that look like to want to settle down somewhere. But all of my 20s, it's just been go. How far can you push it? Follow your dreams. That's kind of what I'm really big on, is just putting the work in to do what makes you excited.
So when you came here though, and this is a big boy job, this is dope that you got this job, but it does take you out of the realm of doing a whole lot of hosting and stuff, right? Because it's pretty demanding you are one of the co-anchors, one of the main people during the week, right?
Yeah, so I anchored the 5 o'clock broadcast and the 10 o'clock broadcast for Eason. It's the ABC affiliate here in
So when
Milwaukee.
You moved here, did you just have to take a back seat with all of that type of, because it's not like you lost interest for doing it, right?
Yeah, well, believe it or not, I wasn't doing a bunch of it anymore. I mean, my last big hosting gig was I hosted for the Braves back in 2021, I believe, in 2022. And I got really lucky. It was with the team when we won the World Series in 2021. Wow. It was one of those gigs where, I was doing the morning show in Columbus, Georgia. So I was down in that small market, my first move into television. I got a big opportunity to host the morning show there. And so I would do the morning show from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. I would do our noon show from 12 to 12:30. I'd get in the car. I'd drive 2 hours to Atlanta to host the Braves pregame show. So it's about a 2-hour drive. I'd get to Atlanta by about 3 o'clock. We would film all of our segments. Hopefully I would be done with that gig. It'd be about a 4 or 5 hour time commitment. Be back on the road by 6 p.m. Drive back to Columbus get home by 8:30 on a good night. Be asleep by 9. Wake up by 3 a.m. to get to work by 4 a.m. to go on the air by 5 a.m. So I did that for 2 years. And so to answer your question, I kind of love the pace of life that I have right now because I joke that those 2 years took years off of my life because it was a lot of early mornings, a lot of travel. But look, I was hosting a morning show. I was living my dream. And then I was also hosting a show for the baseball team that I grew up loving and supporting. And so, and then watching that same team win the World Series in 2021 is a bucket list item. So a lot of the hosting opportunities, believe it or not, Channel 12 here in Milwaukee, where I work now, is really big on getting us out in the community. So back in February, I hosted the Heart Ball at the Pfister Hotel, raised a ton of money for the American Heart Association, which is amazing. And that was one of the big selling points for me to come to work for Channel 12 was how big they are on wanting us to be out and involved in the community and be involved with nonprofits to show that, we truly care about the people who are doing incredible work in our city. Yeah.
Well, and even when you're constantly changing where you live and, changing jobs and all that, and it's like really fast paced, things like you do still hit burnout if you're doing the same thing too much, right?
Absolutely.
And like when you're able to kind of diversify what you do on the day to day because you're going to go do this thing, the sports thing, you're hosting this event, you're doing the anchoring, whatever. When you're like putting it between all these different places, it's a lot more exciting. It's not the same thing, because anything like that, the shine starts to fade regardless of how cool something is if you're doing it all the time.
Absolutely.
So I feel like if all you did was co-hosting or co-anchoring, it might get a little boring.
Yeah. And I think even in the seat that I'm in now, I do the evening news, which this is the first time I've ever done the evening news in my career. I've always been a morning show personality. And so this has been a challenge to, we cover a lot of hard news. Basically, our goal is to try to help viewers make sense of the big news stories that are happening, whether that's health news, whether that's, obviously we're going to have to cover crime as it unfolds in our city. That's a big, that can be a big problem no matter where you live. And so a lot of the times it's the stories that are hard to share, but it's our job to try to help viewers make sense of what's happening around us. And so hosting on the side and doing the nonprofit work honestly brings me a lot of life because I feel like I get to rely on my personality and I get to celebrate, the unsung heroes of our community.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I can't even imagine that would be hard, having to tell heartbreaking stories and then being on camera doing it. It's just a vulnerable thing to have to, to do that and be like, well, so how do I like reflect my emotions in an honest way while still doing this job professionally?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because of all the death and all the horrible things, it'd be easy to just choke up and be like, I'm just too emotional. I can't do it. When you do a lot of these broadcasts, how does it work? Is it like in Anchorman where there is a teleprompter and you're just reading it, or like how much of it is scripted?
Yeah. So, I mean, our show is scripted, no doubt about it. I mean, we are very scripted and mainly for a time perspective. I mean, our goal is, if we're on air for our 5 o'clock broadcast is 30 minutes with commercial breaks, we might have 26 minutes of content, but then you also got to think about there's, weather involved. We have a meteorologist that we work with, Mark Baden. He's amazing, Milwaukee's chief meteorologist. And then, of course, we have the top stories of the day. We might cover some national news. So it is scripted, but, I go in and I read every script before I go on air, and I will change the script to reflect the way that I would say something.
Sure.
And to make it feel authentic to me.
Have you had to change any of that coming to the Midwest? Just as far as like slang or lingo or anything? Because I've had people mention to me on my show where they're like, oh yeah, like you speak fine, like you got a great voice for radio, but you say some weird stuff. And they're like referring to like skateboard talk, like
Yes.
I'll say, oh, that's dope.
Yes.
People are like, why are you saying that? Like, that's what I'm used to.
Honestly, the hardest thing about moving here is the towns.
Is it?
Is learning the name of the towns. I mean,
Sure.
Ashwaubenon, Waukesha, Eau Claire, but it doesn't look like Eau Claire.
Yeah, everyone says Eau Claire or Eclair.
Yes. Wauwatosa, those are all the ones. And I mean, I kid you not, every week I think I learn a new town here. So that's probably been the hardest to learn, is just all the town names. But it's important to get it right.
Yeah. So when you were saying the difference between morning and afternoon or evening news, are the stories like shifted differently that way? So that way the more sobering stories are in the afternoon on purpose?
So I kind of think, the way, at least in my experience, is morning show, there's a different format, right? It's going to be a lot quicker. It's going to be, we're going to try to get a lot more in. Also, we have a lot more time. Most morning shows run anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. So the show I did in Nashville was a 3-hour long morning show. We were on from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. So that's a lot of content that you can put in there. And there's also moments to breathe with your other co-anchor, or having a moment with your meteorologist or your traffic anchor, where you're able to kind of react to a story and to laugh if there's like a little bit of levity, right?
Yeah.
I was telling you, in the evenings, we don't have that time. And so there isn't much time to react. There isn't much time for laughter, because our job is to get the big stories of the day to our viewers to help them make sense of it all, right? So I think the morning show flow is a lot quicker. You have time to react. You have time to laugh. You have time to smile. Our story structure is the same. We're going to tell you the big story, whether it's death, destruction, politics, you name it. That's going to still be in the morning show, but it might not be as long as it would be in the evenings. And at the same time, there's kind of a moment to cleanse your palate, if you will. We'll tell you a story that's going to make you laugh. We're going to tell you a story that's going to make you smile. Whereas we don't have the time to include a lot of those stories in the evenings.
I guess when I pay attention to the news, they repeat the same stories constantly, because they're just like saying, well, whenever you tune in, this is the most important story that you need to hear, because this is like the big thing that's happening in the news. So when you're saying you're on for 2-3 hours, do you not repeat anything?
So there are certainly, basically the way that the station that I work for now, I think we do a really good job at diversifying our content. So I would argue, like, if you watch our morning show here at Channel 12, you're going to get a different set of content per hour. We're really big on not repeating content. Or if we do, there's multiple ways to tell a story, right? It's similar, but not the same rinse and repeat content. Like I could tell you here, we don't repeat any content. There's going to be a different angle to it. There's going to be a different, character involved. I have worked for shows where there is content that is repeated, because a morning show is so long.
Let's talk about you coming here and why you think you got hired for it. Because when I first arrived, we talked a little bit about it off mic. I think news, just like any media, has to evolve, with social media and everything. And there's more and more value to, sounds silly to just say like young kids, but people your age and younger are growing up with social media, and media just being a totally different beast. You know what I mean? So you have a different understanding of how all of it works. So how did this job line up? Because this is still pretty new for you.
Yeah, so not even 6 months in here. And, I was working in Nashville, and we were kind of talking about this before, but look, I love Nashville. Nashville was a wonderful place to live. I had amazing friends there that I still stay in touch with today. And, I was in my 20s, and that's a great place to be in your 20s. But, in our business, we're on contracts, and my contract was coming to an end. And, I had made it very clear to management that I wanted to stay. And this was probably about 9 months before it came to an end. And I hadn't heard anything, basically there's an end date on my contract. And when that end date comes, I don't have a job any longer. And so either the contract has to be extended, or I have to get a new contract. And, 9 months in, nothing, 6 months, nothing, 5 months, nothing, 4 months, nothing. Eventually got down to 3 months. Around 2 months, I started having to kind of like figure out what I want to do next, just in case. I didn't think they were not going to re-sign me. I just think they were taking their time. And that's fine. But at the same time, as they were taking their time, another opportunity presented itself. And it was the one here in Milwaukee. And I had an opportunity to come out here for an interview. I had never been to Milwaukee before. And I remember I came here, and it was for the main anchor job. And as I was telling you, I thought, I'm going to come out here for this job interview. They're not even remotely considering me for this job. Perhaps they're just bringing me out for recruitment purposes, which I'm fine with. It's a free trip to a city I've never been to before. And I remember I toured the station. I had a chance to tour the city. I drove by the lakefront. It was beautiful. It was in August. There were hundreds of people out there. The weather was amazing, because in the South, typically, come June to August, it's just unbearably hot.
Right.
And so coming here, I thought, man, this is really, really cool. And then you've got the lake, which is just beautiful to look at. And I interviewed, I did an anchor run through with the anchors that I work with now. And I just remember being so impressed by the station.
What does that look like? Is that like a read through for like a same thing like a movie where you sit down and you have a table read?
No, so literally I am interviewing that day. I think I was here for 2 to 3 days. It's a bunch of interviews. You're in conference rooms, you're in meetings, you're going to lunches, you're going to dinners. And then for the anchor run through, you meet your possible co-anchor. I walked up and I said, "Hi, my name is Blake," and I got their names, and we walked to set. I put a microphone on. There's a script in the prompter, and basically we would run through it just as any normal newscast would be. And typically you'd read a couple stories. They want to see how you're going to interact with your co-host. And then at the end, there's going to be kind of a moment where you to have some crosstalk is what we call it. And so basically they'll say, "Hey, ask Blake about where he's from, or ask Blake what his favorite foods are." And they just want to see the banter between you and your co-anchor to see if there's some chemistry there.
Do you think it was easier because you didn't expect to get the job at all? Like there's less pressure on you when you were doing
Honestly, probably so.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I think I was just like, I'm kind of one of those people who believes that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, and like what's for you is going to always be yours. And so, I definitely think there's nervousness, of course, because it's a job interview. But at the same time, I just thought there's no way they're going to consider me for the 5 o'clock and the 10 o'clock news. I mean, I remember growing up rushing home after school to go watch the 5 o'clock news and the 10 o'clock news. Like that was just so cool to see, Justin Farmer of WSB TV in Atlanta, Jovita Moore, rest in peace to her. She passed away a couple of years ago after a courageous battle with cancer, and she was our queen of Atlanta. I mean, she was Atlanta news.
Well, in your age group, like, I'm not trying to like sit there and just say you're too young for anything or whatever, but like, I don't think there's that many people in your position with the network this big at your age, right? It's usually older people.
Yeah, it is. And that's why
it takes a while to establish yourself.
I feel incredibly lucky that I was offered this job. I kid you not, I left here, I flew back to Nashville that night, and I remember telling my friends, like, if they offer this job, I'm 100% going to take it, because these jobs just don't come around often. And, it was silent for 4 weeks. I didn't hear anything.
And your other contract's coming up.
Yes. And so at this point, I mean, I kid you not, 4 weeks from there. So I think my contract was up like in weeks away. And, around that time, it was a Thursday afternoon. I was taking a nap after work because I was working the morning show in Nashville. And I remember my agent called me and he was like, "They offered the job."
Wow.
And I was like, "Are you serious?" And he was like, "Yeah, they offered the 5 p.m. and the 10 p.m. And I was like, "Let's do it." And I kid you not, the next day being Friday, the station in Nashville offered a new contract.
Did that help with negotiating, or was the dollar amount already like locked in with Milwaukee, being this is what it was going to be?
I think it was more so the opportunity, honestly. I mean, this was an opportunity to do the 5 o'clock, 10 o'clock news.
Well, because how many positions like that really exist in the whole country? Right? Like of news stations that are on that like scale.
Right.
How many times does an anchor for a 5 o'clock pop up? Like,
I guess
I don't know what number that is in the country, but less than 100 of those jobs exist.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So the fact that any of them pop up at any time, you're like, "Oh my God, I'm in the right place at the right time. How can you not say no?" Like,
absolutely.
When would it come up again?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think too, it was the opportunity. And then I think too, I had never heard of a contract being drawn out that long where I had not heard anything about what my next deal was going to look like. And
with Nashville, you're saying?
Yeah. I think, and that's hard, man. Like, not knowing where you're going to live. I didn't want to re-sign an apartment lease. Like, these are all the little things you're thinking about.
Right.
And the opportunity came, and like you said, these opportunities don't come often. And then you add on the fact that the company I work for is Hearst. It's a really good company, amazing company. They care about storytelling. They care about journalists. That's our parent company of WISN. And then you take WISN, we're the number one station in Milwaukee. Yeah. I've never worked for a number one station before. Sure. So there's an excitement there's a pressure, of course, but there's an excitement that comes with that, to be able to join the award-winning news team of Milwaukee. Like, we have some of the best reporters, photojournalists, producers. The producer that I work with has been doing this longer than I've been alive. She's one of the best producers I've ever worked with. And so to be able to be surrounded by that level of talent on a daily basis, it was a no-brainer.
Quick thank you to Drink Wisconsin Blee. I'm going to go interview Richard right after this. We are not consuming anything today, partially because there's no way I can actually do a good interview if I'm not completely sober. But still, thanks to Drink Wisconsin Blee, which is a Milwaukee brand, which is kind of fitting for this.
Yes.
So I think when you move in here, like you come to a new city, your personal life all of a sudden now is like relatively on display, and you have to be kind of protective of that. Has safety or like personal safety been a thing for you? And has that been something that like, as you grow in this career, your agent or, you know, the HR departments you work with start to tell you like, hey, these are things to be careful with. These are things to avoid personally. I mean, I'm the I'm the vice chair of the Parks and Waterways Commission with my city. And even that, I had like a paper to sign that was like, I'm not allowed to talk about these things publicly. I'm not allowed to talk this, or, you know what I mean?
Right.
There's like a code of conduct, which applies to my personal life outside of the job. I feel like there must be something kind of similar with what you do.
You know, thankfully for me, I have not ever felt unsafe at any point in this job. You know, I think there are people that will write crazy things online. I think that just comes with it. That's the cost of admission to be in this business. And I think, you know, news people are under a certain kind of scrutiny right now, just given the state of affairs in the world, I think make our jobs a little bit more difficult.
And ultimately, it's not you who's writing the story, right? You're the anchor, but the stories are written by the team with the news station. So even if you were like, I can't tell this story because this person threatened me or whatever, the story would be told. Because it's not you personally who's deciding that.
But then also, too, like I'm going to do my own reporting on the stories that we are reporting on to make sure that it's fair and it's balanced. And so...
how do you do that, though? Because like there aren't... I mean, that's a huge problem in America right now is there aren't like really real news stations where you're like, I know that these things are for sure factual, right? There's just so much biased stuff. And when you're trying to do your own research online, it's really hard to know what is for sure true and what isn't.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, we live in a time now where truth can be debated. And I think what's true is true. And like, you know, I think a big misconception is I think people think there are opinion people on all of the networks, but then there's also like real journalists on the networks as well. And take out the opinion shows on any of the networks we're considering right now. There are true journalists there who are going to have all of their information sourced. It's going to have to be factual, because if it's not, they could face lawsuits. And so I think that's where the misconception is like what we put on television, we have to have it verified. We have to have it thoroughly sourced. And unfortunately, we're in a time now where there is so much, I don't even want to use the phrase, but fake news, like that people can just throw that out there when it's a story that they don't like or when it's a story that they don't want. But that doesn't mean it's not real.
Well, and you can paint a different picture with the same like real things, right? You could just paint a story in a different way that pushes, you know, whatever personal belief or whatever. Do you ever run into things? I know that news should be unbiased, and the station you work for is definitely not known to be biased in any kind of way, but do you ever run into anything where you're like, my personal beliefs don't necessarily align with what I'm trying to say here? Or like if you have like a personal belief behind it where you're like, I would really like to talk about it in this light because this is what I feel, but you can't because it has to be completely unbiased and it's already kind of written for you?
Oh, no question. I mean, look, I signed to be a journalist, not a personality. And it's like, and even if, you know, my role in the future of this media business was to change, like particularly specifically right now, I'm a journalist. And so it does not matter what I think, what I say, what I believe, my personal beliefs are. At the end of the day, the news is the news, and it's got to be just that. And I think we do a really good job at letting it be just that. We're going to be straight, we're going to be fair, we're going to be down the middle, and there's not going to be any influence. And gratefully for us, like it's not just, you know, a producer will write the first draft of a story, but I always tell people there are so many drafts of a story that we will work through from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5:02 when that story is read on air. And so typically the way it works is our producer will write the story, I'll come in, I'll do my own additional reporting, and I might change it in a way that is true to how I would say something. Like, for example, there's a lot of there's TV speak, right? You know, police will often use transported to the hospital.
Sure.
That's not how I talk in real life. Right. I will always change that to taken to the hospital because that's how we would say things.
Right,
and so my job when I say I come in and rewrite scripts to how I would say it is I want to make it more conversational. I want to make it seem like we're just sitting at a table having a conversation. So I'll change it there. And then most of the time, one of our managers will come through and then they'll rework it as well. And so I trust that the copy that we end up with on air has went through several layers of checks and balances to ensure that it's fair.
Yeah, well, that's the big difference then between things like social media or like, you know, talk shows like this or whatever, is there aren't all of those, like, I don't want to say lines of defense, but there isn't all that, you know, that red tape that's there for a reason to make sure things are where they need to be. But talking about that, like I said earlier with you, people who grew up with social media bring a ton of value to, media sources such as news, because they realize that like, hey, less and less people are watching news in the traditional way.
Right.
They still want news. They're just consuming news in a different way. Right. And so when you come in and you've built a following across TikTok and Instagram and whatnot, that attaches a bunch of value there. So where is the line then, as far as like, how much of that is you and your person and what you want to say and what you believe? Because obviously your team can't then go and check everything you're going to post across your Instagram stories or anything. And it's not like you're going to say, hey, to my agent, can I post this picture of me with my family? You know what I mean? Because
Right.
that would be ridiculous. Like that's underneath too much of a microscope. So where is like the line of what you can and can't say on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I try to just have a delicate balance of what I think is authentic to me, but then also responsible for the role that I have, right? Like I don't want to put the company in jeopardy. I don't want to put, myself in jeopardy, but I also don't want to put the station in jeopardy. So there's just things that I'm constantly thinking about. But then also too, like I try to just be honest and say like, the Blake that you see on television is the Blake in real life. And so like there is not a big misconception of who I try to portray myself to be on television that's so far different from who I am in real life. And so like, for example, like, yeah, I will go out with friends on a Saturday night and have a drink. Tequila is my preference. And like, I don't feel like that there's anything wrong with that. Like I think specifically what excites me about this new generation is I think people want to know who they're getting their news from. They want to trust it, and it has to be authentic to them. And I think back in the day, even some of the the anchormen that our parents grew up with, were kind of put on a pedestal, and we don't really know much about their personal life, for good or for worse. But like, I think we live in a world now where people want to know different areas of you. People want to know the music that you listen to. I think a large part of my success on TikTok was because I think we broke the curtain a little bit, or peeled back the curtain, if you will, and showed that I listen to the same songs that you might listen to, or I love hip hop. And maybe people thought that a news anchor wouldn't like hip hop for whatever reason that might be. Like, I don't know what it was, but I think there was a level of it where people felt like it was relatable that we all listen to the same songs, we all go to the same restaurants. And so I think social media gives us a chance to be more relatable than what you would typically see on a 30-minute broadcast where we're going through the stories of the day.
Yeah, it does also keep you in a vulnerable place though, because it's so easy to take something out of context.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean that it's an untrue thing. It's just somebody could take a picture or whatever of you where you're like taking a shot of tequila and then paint a picture of that.
Totally.
Of like, this is every night, this is what this person does, which is not true. But you kind of like open yourself up for that. So I was listening to a different interview that you did back in 2020, and then I listened to you going back on the Burt Show. And there's a whole like 10-minute segment I think it's on YouTube, where you're talking to Burt about your sexuality, and you came out on that show. And I'm curious, as far as something on like a major news station in media, that's like such a hot topic, and I feel like it really shouldn't be, but I feel like it is in our country with how divided it is at the moment. Have you seen any impact of after you came out in any, I guess, positive or negative way on your career, or has it just been a non-thing?
Non-thing, dude. Like, it's been kind of the coolest, but like least exciting thing. Which, the reason I did it on that show was because that show meant so much to me, and Burt meant so much to me. And I believe, if I remember correctly, I did it on my birthday, if I remember correctly. Cool. And so it was just like a moment where I was like, I was in a relationship and I wanted to share that, and I also think too, like, there are people in our business who I've looked up to immensely. Like Robin Roberts is someone who I love how she's lived her life. She is married, she has a wife, but that is one small thing about her. But at the same time, she's paved the way for so many people to be their true, authentic self, and to have a seat at the table. And I think that, with a platform, there is a responsibility. And so that was my conviction and why I wanted to do it. And there was legit no blowback. Like, I had never had a conversation with any of my managers about it. It's never come up at any conversation I've had with executives in the business. Even online, I don't think I experienced any hate online from it. There was more so just kind of celebration and, gratitude for opening up about that part of my life. Sure, there was a fear going into it that, could people, take this one element of who I am and make it much bigger than what it is, and try to assume that, I'm going to be biased in some way or the other because of this. That hasn't happened.
So it was relatively anticlimactic, which is kind of the best case scenario, right? Because it's not supposed to be something where everyone needs to talk about because it's not that important.
Totally.
You're reporting on the news. It'd be like saying, well, it matters so much what basketball team you root for. You're like, it's just not relevant information.
Right.
You know what I mean? As far as like what the job is.
Absolutely.
Talking about sports, you said you did stuff with, I know I'm just like shifting here, but you said you did stuff with the Braves. I got to assume you were a relatively big sports fan to like be interested in doing that in the first place. When you have to like jump ship and move to these different areas, is that a challenge for you with like who you personally want to root for? Does that ever come up?
So I will say, for example, I love the Braves. That's my hometown team growing up. So
if the Brewers are playing them,
I'm wearing my Braves jersey. But I'm wearing a Brewers jersey for every other game throughout the season.
Okay.
And I think that just comes with it. It's exciting to move to a new city and have new teams to cheer for. The only exception I would say is like, obviously, Georgia Bulldogs. I enjoy cheering for them, but that's SEC. I live in a different part of the country now. And for the Braves, right? Like when the Braves come to town, I'm going to cheer for them because that's my hometown team. But like the Bucks, what a great team to cheer for. Like
you came in at a good time for that.
Yeah. And I'm like, Marquette, are you kidding me? Like, I had the most fun that I've ever had at a basketball game at a Marquette basketball game.
Sure.
Like it was awesome. And so I think living here in Milwaukee, living here in Wisconsin, we have some pretty incredible teams to cheer for. And then you mentioned the Packers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what an incredible, just iconic institution in sports, right?
Dude, I interviewed a Packers player and he was just like a backup tight end, but the fact I got to go to Lambeau, get his jersey, go to the apartment building they all live at and like do an interview with them, and this was like a few years ago, I was giddy.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because I just like, I have a Packers helmet tattooed right there. Like I grew up such a huge fan where it's just like, whoa. And that's what's crazy too is like careers like yours or careers like mine, like where all these different doors open that you didn't really expect. You know what I mean? Like when I started doing the show, I didn't really think about like, oh, I could potentially interview rappers I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah.
Oh, I could potentially go to Lambeau and like make money doing this, or go to this music festival and like that was my job for the day. I didn't really consider those things as opportunities that would come up. What has been one of the coolest opportunities that came up that you weren't expecting to happen and it did, and you were like, whoa, that was rad.
Being in Nashville, I got to cover the CMAs. That was an incredible experience, just to cover some of the biggest country music artists in the world on their biggest night. I'm trying to think I got to interview my idol, Ryan Seacrest.
Really?
Literally on the set of American Idol.
Whoa.
That was a really big moment of my career to be able to meet him. He knew who I was. I interned at, he has radio stations in children's hospitals all across the country. They're called Seacrest Studios. It's a really incredible mission. Basically, it's a radio station because he started in radio to give kids at hospitals a chance to come out of their rooms and to like play around with the radio equipment, to act like a DJ, to host their own talk show. But at the same time, it's a radio station, so celebrities will come by and they'll do an interview with the kids that are in the hospital. And so it's a moment for them to meet some of their favorite people on the planet while they're battling a sickness that we couldn't even imagine, right?
Sure.
And so I interned at Seacrest Studios for several years when I was in Atlanta. And I got to interview Ryan on the set of American Idol, and it was really, really cool. Just a full circle moment to be able to interview someone who has been such an inspiration to me.
What was the most impactful thing that you can recall from your experiences with him? Any specific words that he told you, or anything that you just saw like him do, watch and learn type situation? Like what was the most impactful thing?
He was just really nice.
Sure.
He has a way to make whoever he's talking to feel like the most important person in the world. And so I don't know if there was like an assistant nearby who probably briefed him on like, hey, here's who's coming to interview you. Here's a few pieces of information about this person. But his ability to make it seem like that was authentic to him, I think was really impressive. And he's just a very normal person. Like, I would never forget, I was leaving the interview and he was like, yeah, you live here in Nashville now, right? And I said, yeah. He's like, oh, great. Well, we're in town all the time, so I'd love to see you on some of our sets in the future. Like, just made it seem so casual. And I'm like, dude, you're Ryan Seacrest. I'm not getting anywhere near you. You know what I mean? Like, but it was cool how he still has that down to earth personality.
Yeah. I've been surprised. I don't know why when I was younger, I just assumed famous people were jerks, and like the more successful people I've met, almost all of them are super nice.
Right.
And it really did click with me that like they wouldn't be this successful if they weren't that nice. Like that is part of the reason that all these doors have opened up for them over time and all these opportunities have happened, because people like being around them. People like working with people that they like.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the fact that you can bring this positive energy, I'm sure has contributed to you getting the opportunities you have. I'm curious, because I know that your music selection is kind of all over the place, but I know that you're a fan of rap music. Who do you think is the most underrated rapper that people should hear more of?
Oh gosh, most underrated rapper. I mean, I think, I still listen to Big Sean. I feel like Big Sean had an incredible run years ago, but I still feel like Big Sean has so many classics that are so slept on. Let me look at my Spotify and see like who I think people should be. I mean,
who are your top 3 artists on Spotify last year?
Oh, dude. Okay, so last year, I mean, Drake is going to always be up there. One that shocked me was Rich Homie Quan. But Rich Homie Quan passed away last year. And so I think that was probably why I just went back. That album, Still Going In, is like one of the best hip hop albums, in my opinion, that came out of Atlanta.
Wow.
And there was a time living in Atlanta where we were producing the best rappers. Like, people will debate lyrics and all that kind of stuff, but I'm like, who was on the radio? Who were you listening to most? And I would say Lil Baby was probably my top last year as well. But let's see here. I'm listening to a guy named Ian. Ian has a nice little run right now. He's kind of getting all the rave.
Just IAN?
Yeah.
Okay.
He has a great one. I would say, those are just a couple that are kind of on the docket right now, if you will.
Dude, I need to go listen to a playlist. You got to send me some stuff, and we could do like a 10-song playlist or something.
Deal.
That would be fun, because I do program this into the radio, so I can just play music like whenever I want. So we should do that.
So when I was starting to go viral on TikTok, people were like, "Hey, you should make a playlist." So I made a playlist called like pre-show playlist, or like songs that I just listen to when I'm getting ready.
Sure.
So I'll send that to you.
When did you start doing TikTok stuff? I guess we haven't really touched on that. I know Instagram's like the platform people give the most credit to, which I don't know if that's how it should be or not. I used to believe in it more, but now TikTok, like, I feel like Instagram's just been trying to be more like TikTok over and over again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's getting closer and closer to that. When did you start doing stuff on that and talking about like going viral? What is your follower count on TikTok now?
So I think we're like over 600,000 now.
Yeah. So how did that take off? Doing what?
It was crazy. So it was like, probably I was in Nashville for a couple of months. I had just got a new co-anchor on our show. Her name is Allie, and we're still really good friends. And we were just kind of goofing around one day, and I was creating content. I was doing day in the lives, and they would never really go anywhere. I'd get like 1,000 views, and I never really liked it. I didn't enjoy like setting up my camera and like walking into the frame. Like,
sure.
I'm still trying to find like the kind of day in the life video I want to create, but I knew I didn't enjoy that kind. It didn't feel authentic to me, and it never went viral. And then someone told me that like the content that you make should be the most fun, and it should be really easy for you to do. Like, you shouldn't have to give it much thought.
Sure.
And so one day we were listening to a Justin Bieber song. There was a Big Sean verse in it. I rapped the whole thing, and I just posted it.
Give me a time and place, I rendezvous it, I fly to it, I beat you there. Girl, you know I got you.
And it went viral. And like, I went to sleep, woke up the next morning, 10,000 views. And I was like, this is crazy, 10,000 views. And then it got to like 20,000, 30,000. And so then at that point, I just started doing more hip hop songs, and I would just lip sing them. And I think people were just like, had this misconception that like, I don't know if a news anchor listened to hip hop music. I don't know what it was. And so that was kind of the secret to success, was I was just showing off the songs that I loved and knew all the words to, and then people would say, have you heard this song? And I would respond to the comment with that song, and it kind of developed into a world of its own. And then Allie and I would do TikToks together where like, if there was like a woman on the song, she would sing that part, and then I would rap the other part. And so it was kind of like this really unique chemistry that we had. And here we are with over 500,000 followers later. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, even lip syncing, you still have to then be able to rap what the lines are.
Right.
Right? Otherwise, it wouldn't line up. Have there been artists that you just avoided where you're like, I can't keep up with Twisted's verse on this. Like, I'm not even going to try.
So I try to stay away from cuss words. So like a song will have a cuss word, but the part that I will lip sync, I will not do the cuss word, because I try to keep it clean. Yeah. Now, there's cuss words in every song out there these days. So like, you can't, not do a song just because it has it in it. But the parts that I do, I try to keep it clean.
Sure. But I'm saying, as far as like how difficult it is, like one of my favorite rappers is Aesop Rock. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
And I know I was reading an interview with him that he did in Thrasher, because he's a skateboarder. And he was talking about how there are older songs of his in his catalog that he can't perform anymore.
Oh, wow.
Because there was a time frame during his career where he was intentionally trying to write lyrics like to be as difficult as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And so he had to like train himself to be able to do that. And he's out of practice and he's like, I'm just never going to be able to do those ones again. That's just out of my league. Were there ones like that where you're like, I just can't keep up?
You know, if I like the song and it's a fast song like that, I will listen to it thousands of times to be able to do it. Like the Big Sean, As Long As You Love Me, that's a Justin Bieber record that Sean is featured on. And it's a really tough verse. I mean, he is going fast. He is spitting. And like, I take great pride in being able to deliver that. You know, another one is like Meek Mill, Dreams and Nightmares. Like the beat change in that halfway through that song. Like, I know every word to that song and I'm very proud of it. But like there are some like Twista records that like maybe I just wasn't a fan of that I just never really decided to commit to memory.
Sure. Did that help you with your ability to enunciate words in general, like with public speaking? Because I guess how much of it is live now when you're on TV? Because it's off a teleprompter, but I feel like in today's world with the technology we have, it doesn't actually have to be live, right? It could be recorded. An editor then could like fix things and put it up within 5 minutes. So
True, but I will tell you every broadcast that we do is live.
Wow.
We are live on the air. I mean, I have an earpiece in my ear. I get a countdown from a producer and a director who is telling me how long we have before we go back on the air.
Yeah.
And so everything we do is live. There are some shows that are recorded, like if it's like a special or a project, but what we do is all live.
Do you ever get stuck like stumbling during it,
yes,
where then you like can't get past it, or are you quick to recover every time?
I think I have a quick recovery, but like I think even the best fall down. I mean, there was a moment, a couple of weeks ago, and it's what I don't mind bloopers. Like I actually have a folder on my phone of all of my bloopers because they make me laugh.
Sure.
And I think it shows that you're human.
Yeah, it makes you relatable.
I had one the other day. A couple of weeks ago, I was trying to say military and I said militelli, and then I went back and I tried to say it again to fix it and I said militelli again, and I just stopped and I said helicopter because I just couldn't. It just wouldn't roll off my tongue that way. And now my co-anchor and I joke, it's an inside joke, and my nickname from her is Telly. So whenever I come into work, she's like, "Hi Telly, how are you today?" And so that's how. Sometimes I think those are some of the best moments, it shows that you're not a robot.
Did you ever have a moment in your career where that was like a light switch where you just weren't really nervous about that anymore? Because I had that like with the show where I was just not nervous to do interviews anymore. Not that I don't ever like that I'm never shaky or anything, but I don't have this like overwhelming feeling of like, oh my God, I hope I don't mess this up. There was just like an interview where it was when I interviewed Wayne Hoffman a long time ago, where after that I was just like, oh, I know how to do this and I'm not really stressed out about it.
Totally. I mean, I think after the first market, which I think why going to a small market is crucial for people in our business, because you can make mistakes and you're going to be okay and you're going to learn to bounce back from it. And then I also think just like the anxiety, like we deal with enough pressure of like getting the facts right and getting the story right and telling the story to our best of our ability. Like I'm going to control the things that I can control, but some things like a blooper and I just mess up.
Sure.
Like now granted, if I'm not reading my scripts beforehand and if I'm not rewriting them to make them make sense for me and that's a consistent thing and I'm messing up, that's a problem. But like I know that the scripts that I bring to air are going to be vetted. They're going to be truthful, factual, and they're going to be in my voice. And I know that I've prepped and I've done the work on the front end as you have, for this podcast.
Yeah.
And like, there's just some variables that you just can't control.
What are 3 things that you've learned that have helped you become a better public speaker?
Well, I was in college and my professor, I had a really strong Southern accent because I'm from middle Georgia.
Yeah.
And she told me that if I never changed my accent, I would never get a job in broadcast television.
Oh, no.
And so this was like probably junior year of college. And so from that point forward, I started enunciating everything. So I would, enunciate when I'm on the phone with friends. If I was like ordering at a drive-through, like I would make sure I hit every single syllable of the word to make sure that it was coming out as clean and clear and concise as possible. And so that was a big thing for me. But I'm sorry, what are 3 things that helped you become a better public speaker? So that was one of them. So if I'm like doing a keynote or something and I'm public speaking, I like to write down everything that I want to say and then I throw it away because I don't want to be so on script that I sound like a robot. So I think like word vomiting on paper of like what I'm trying to get across, that helps me kind of structure like I want to say this first. I want to hit this in the middle, and I want to land on this. I believe in bullet points. So like, I don't like to write out, like if I'm hosting, a lot of hosting that I did for the Braves was unscripted. Like we would just go off the cuff. So I would write down bullet points of things that I wanted to mention. Like if we're talking about a brand or if there's like a particular story, I would write down a little keyword that I'm going to remember to get me to that story, but I'd let the conversation flow as conversational as it can be. And then I would say the third thing would be to smile. The more you're smiling, the less people are worried about your mistakes.
Sure. Yeah, I guess it just makes you more likable, and it's hard to like hate somebody that is smiling.
Yeah, like if someone's smiling and they mess up, you're like, they're endearing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. What are your 3 wildest experiences you've had as a street correspondent? Because I've seen like you have a reel on your YouTube where it shows you ziplining and shows you at stadiums eating crazy foods and all that. Like, what are 3 things that come to mind that were like pretty wild?
I would say covering the Braves World Series parade. Once in a lifetime moment.
Did you get to go on any of the floats or anything?
Yeah, I hosted the float. So I was on the float, like on the microphone as we drove through the city of Atlanta. It was the most wildest experience of my entire life.
Yeah, and you can't really prep too much for that, right? Because like when would you have done that before, or when are you going to do it again?
You can assume you're going to win the World Series, let alone be in the World Series parade.
Sure.
I mean, I would honestly say probably when I moved here to Milwaukee, I mean, a month into my job here, we had the school shooting in Madison, and I went out there and field anchored from Madison 2 nights that week. And it was like 2 weeks before Christmas. And I just think being on the ground and reporting is going to always be important to me. And so like having a main anchor job now where I anchor the show 5 and 10 and I'm in the studio, it's really important for me to find moments to where I can go out in the community and be on the ground and be a part of a story that way, because there's only so much information you can learn being behind a desk versus being out in the field. And so being there on the ground in Madison, after having covered the school shooting in Nashville, there were so many similarities that would eventually come to be true about this school shooting in Madison. And so, nothing can really prepare you for that.
Yeah. Do you ever spend time thinking about how, you come across on camera and who's going to receive that information, such as like, if you're having a conversation with somebody, the way that you send a text versus the way that you would say it in a voice memo versus the way you would say it face to face, the same sentence can come across differently to different people. And when you're talking about something like school shootings or in general, something that's like a really sensitive topic, family members are sending that news story to other family members that are in a really struggling, and you're the person who's sharing that information with them.
Absolutely.
Like accepting and knowing the weight of the words that you carry, was that something that was like a conscious decision or a conscious effort to put in of like, I need to be aware of how I'm doing this because of all the weight it carries?
It's the hardest part of the job. I mean, I will rewrite my scripts hundreds and hundreds of times before I actually go on air with what I'm going to say, because I want it to be clear, I want it to be concise, but I also want it to be empathetic. And I want you to know that like, I want to come across as believable, but I also want to come across as someone who feels it as well, because this is our community. And I think like that is the difference in time that we're in now, where I think people do look to their news anchors to be authentic, and being authentic is being real about the story and sharing to an extent of how it impacted me as well. Not so much me particularly, but just the impact on the ground, whether that's the conversations I'm having with students or teachers or faculty. And so I spend a lot of, especially if I'm reporting in the field, I spend a lot of time going back and forth over how I want to say something, the tone in which I want to say it in. And I hope my empathy is shown up front.
Yeah. How do you separate your personal feelings from it, just as far as like being able to recharge and have personal boundaries with it? Because it's too much of a burden to constantly have to be thinking about it. Like I'm in a position where, since I work by myself, I just, for the most part, don't look at the news because I know how much it stresses me out.
Yeah.
And like, I need to know certain, information, but I can shut it off.
Yeah.
And that is really important for my mental health. But as you grow in your career, you have more and more weight on your shoulders of more and more people are seeing these. The stories that you're telling carry a lot of weight. How do you check yourself out so that way you can kind of recharge and not like, I don't know, go down a deep dark hole?
It's hard. I mean, I think there's definitely been moments where it's been more difficult than others. I mean, I would say, I have an ability to compartmentalize, and so I think that's helpful.
How did you learn to compartmentalize? What do you do to do that?
I I think talking to friends back at home, like talking to the people who know you best, and then like, you know, talking to friends where you don't talk about work.
Yeah.
I think is like really big. I like to binge watch a show. Like I don't have anything on the docket today, and I cannot wait to sit on my couch and binge watch a television show.
What was the last show you binge watched?
So, gosh, the last show, which one was it? I just finished one on Netflix that was really good. Night Agent.
I haven't seen that.
Really
one.
good.
I'm rewatching Peaky Blinders right now, which I think is one of the most as good as it is, and as much as people talk about it, I still think it's one of the most underrated shows ever made.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say this because I feel kind of embarrassed, but one of my favorite shows on Netflix is Virgin River, and it is the most hallmarky kind of show that there could be, but it's like based in this like forest, and this nurse moves there to like restart her life. She ends up falling in love with this guy named Jack, and it's the best show. It's my comfort television. It completely takes me out of the city that I'm in, and I'm like in this forest. I'm a part of Virgin River, and I love that show so much. It's just makes me happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think being able to compartmentalize and figuring out some way to do that is really important.
Yeah.
You know, like even when I'm driving all the way down here, I'm listening to all these interviews and I'm trying to take in all this information so that way I'm as prepared as possible going into it and I'm in the right headspace for what I'm about to do. But then when I have the 4-hour drive home, I'm not listening to an interview.
Yes.
Like I'm done. My brain is done. I'm going to have a Red Bull so I don't get too tired because I'm driving at night, but I'm only listening to music because I have to be able to shut my brain off in order to do what I do, you know, when I'm editing or when I'm recording.
Totally.
Otherwise, it's way too much.
Like I told you today, I'm going to go on a bike ride.
So how are you going to connect with the city of Milwaukee so that way you love the city? Obviously, you're about to go on a bike ride, but what are like your list of things that you can't wait to do in this city?
I got a list. You ready for this?
Yeah.
So ready for Summerfest. But like I set a thing where I wanted to have 100 coffees in 100 days since moving here. And so I'm on like coffee number 60 right now. And these are just people in the city that have you know, an influential voice in Milwaukee, whether it's city leaders, whether it's aldermen, alderwomen, whether it's government officials, or just like concerned neighbors.
Having coffee with different people every time? Oh my God. Okay.
So I'm like on coffee number like 50. I think I hit coffee 50 this week.
Wow.
And so that's been a really fun way to, one, find new coffee shops to explore, meet different people. I've never done that for any city that I've lived in. And that's been like a really cool way to get to know the city because you learn from people who've been here, if they grew up here and they have their favorite things.
Who gave you that idea? I've never heard that idea, but that's genius.
I said it for myself. I just randomly was like, you know, I need to figure out a way to meet people, and the way to meet people is to ask them for coffee. And so I just started, you know, reaching out to people, and some are like high up people in the, like some of the biggest entrepreneurs that we have here, and some are just, you know, people who live on one street and know a lot about the city. And so that's been a really fun way. By the way, I'm going to count this as a coffee even though we haven't had coffee. So, you know, just little moments like that. Went to a Marquette game when I first moved here, went to a Bucks game. I can't wait to go to a Brewers game. I hear we have a lot of festivals at the festival grounds in the summertime, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm really just excited for summer in the Midwest.
Yeah. I mean, the state park system in general is beautiful in Wisconsin. And I told you before, I don't think that it gets nearly enough credit. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of the episodes. There are a couple other questions I like to ask on every episode.
Yeah.
First one, what was the most recent thing that you've learned, whether it's life or career? Not the biggest overarching thing that you've learned over the last decade, the most recent thing. It could be as small as like, oh, I just learned how to do this thing in Photoshop today, or oh, I just learned this about pitching a media kit, or I learned this little tip about how I can get a hold of people that I don't have their phone number. Like, what's the last thing that you learned?
So I'll give you like a super like trivial answer first, and then I'll like be deeper. But like I found an AI app, and I've kind of been one of those guys that's like kind of like against AI because I'm kind of scared of it because I don't really know what it's like. But there's an app called Vetted, and basically you can type in a product that you're looking for, and it will give you the most cost-friendly item with the highest reviews. So if you're looking for like the best protein bar, it's going to scan the entire internet and all of the marketplaces online to find the highest reviewed but cost efficient item there is and give you all these options for it. And so I've been addicted to it. So like I'm looking at best protein bars, best protein powders, best patio sets, you know, best bathing suit, like just random things that like I know I need, and that's been really
feels like a life hack that you just shared that. That's incredible.
I'm not sponsored by them at all, but another thing I would say, I mean, I think, you know, moving here, the first really the first 3 months here were really challenging. It was cold, it was dark. I had tried to stop taking Lexapro because I thought that I was in a better place just with anxiety. I've always kind of struggled with anxiety, and that was not a smart idea. And so I think just like knowing that like life is not this like straight path where like you figure one thing out and there's not to say that it's going to come raging back one day. Like I think that like, this is an amazing job opportunity and I was so excited to get this job. And in my mind, it's like everything's gonna be perfect when I get there. But it's like you can have a incredible job, move to an incredible city, and then there are still things that are going to happen along the way that challenge you to look at life through a different lens. Yeah. And so like I was not prepared for like the seasonal depression that comes with living in a town in the Midwest that's cold and rainy and snowy and dark and gray.
And without friends yet.
And without friends. Like that just caught me off guard. And so I think it was one of those things that like taught me that, you can have this picture perfect idea of how you think life is going to go once you make a big decision, but there's always going to be the things that you can't control that come up along the way.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on how you look at it, but I think it's a really good thing. It's because people put so much weight with these expectations on achieving this thing in their career. And they're like, I'm only going to be happy when I achieve this thing. And then they achieve that thing and they realize that they aren't happier. And it can be really difficult for a lot of people. But I think it's empowering to look at it in the other way and say, okay, well, what that means is I don't actually have to achieve this thing to be happy.
No.
Because the happiness comes from other things, right? It comes from having all these coffee dates with all these different people, right? Like the small things that are controllable, that aren't based on success, that can make your life happier. And figuring out how you can control those controllables and set yourself up to be happy, which isn't going to be permanently always happy, but to set up a life that is the least stressful for you, that's the most fulfilling, that's enjoyable. Then the whole journey to get to that point is enjoyable. And then when you do achieve that thing, it's just like a little celebration of, cool, I hit this milestone. Now let's go to the next thing. But every day is enjoyable. That's how I try to look at it, of like, I know where I want this thing to grow to, but like my day-to-day right now is pretty dope.
Right.
It's not where I want it to be long-term yet, but that's okay. Cause right now it's pretty nice still. So when you do a career that you're passionate about, like what you do, you get to have really unique experiences, which you've already described, a handful of them. If you had to pick one day that you could relive from your career so far, which one would you pick, and walk me through it?
Whew. Oh, that's easy, man. The Braves winning the World Series and maybe even the World Series parade. Like, I'll give you the play-by-play of both of those days. The first one was when the Braves won the World Series. They were in Houston. So the Braves opened up the stadium at home in Atlanta to have a watch party. And so the team wasn't actually at home when they won. They were away. Sure. And so we were just like living our best life. But
epic tailgate.
So I was not actually working that night because the Braves were away, and I only worked the home games when I worked for the Braves. And so I was just there with friends who were watching the game, and my boss was like, hey, you're allowed to go to this game if you want, but like if the Braves win the World Series, you've got to be on air the next morning because that's obviously going to be the big story, and like you cannot miss work because you were in Atlanta partying with Braves fans. And I was like, okay, fine. So I end up going to the game. The Braves win. It's midnight. I drive back to Columbus, 2 hours away, go home, shower, get coffee, and back at work at 3 a.m. So I didn't go to sleep that entire night, and then go on the air that morning, like covering all the excitement of the Braves winning the World Series. That was a day that was just, I'll never forget. Like no sleep, going on the air and doing a morning show was just wild. And then I would say the Braves World Series parade, I had no idea that I was hosting the parade. I just knew that there was the fan experience team. They were going to be in a float on the parade, which was awesome within its own right. And then I get there that morning and they're like, by the way, has anyone told you that you're hosting the parade? And I said, no.
Small detail.
I had not been told that. And so I was just like going over my script last minute, getting in the float, and then here we are.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
Well, thank you so much for hosting me and allowing this to happen. I guess I didn't even realize how recent you had moved here when I messaged you.
Yeah.
You had just like popped up on my social media somehow, and I was like, I would love to interview an anchor for the news. That sounds rad. But I didn't know you had just moved here.
Yes.
And so like we got in contact a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So that would have been literally right when you got here.
When I moved here. Because I was just trying to find like, different people in the state that I wanted to connect with, and found your podcast, and I thought it was really impressive, and how like the setup was so professional and the quality was excellent. And I thought, man, this is really cool. So I just kind of followed you as a fan of what you were doing and looking for other, interesting voices here in the state. And then it led to this. So I just appreciate you being willing to do it. And obviously I'm a fan of this podcast, which is why I'm doing it. So I think, the more that we can all encourage people to pursue the things they're passionate about, I think it makes a better world for everybody.
Absolutely. And this was a powerful conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Like, people in your position, not to say the most successful person that's ever been, born, but not that many people in your position with what you do as a career actually tell their stories.
Right.
And it's really hard for somebody to realize something's possible if they haven't seen anyone else around them do it. And that's what I think is so powerful about this show, is people then can watch it and go, oh, I can relate to Blake. Blake's a normal person. If he could do that, well, maybe I could do that.
That's what I hope my life is for people, because that's what my life was for me, was looking to see other people and how they did it. And it's like, you just got to work hard and follow what you're passionate about. And there's roads that we can go down that it's really difficult, as and following your dreams is not the easiest thing, but I do think it's worth it. And to your point, we were always taught to cover the news, not be the news. But I do think there's moments like this where it's fun to peel back the curtain a little bit and to share how we got to where we are.
Yeah. And again, things are just evolving. This is what people are expecting moving forward. And they see that from music artists or anything else, is people want to feel like they can relate to these people. So moving forward, where can people best reach out if they did have a question that we didn't get to? Because obviously we talked for a while, but there's way more to talk about. So if there is another question somebody wanted to ask, or if they wanted to follow your journey, what's the best places for all that?
Yeah, Instagram is the place where I think I connect with people the most. TikTok, as you mentioned, is kind of just a really fun platform to be on, just because you can kind of create so much content. So messages there kind of get lost, but Instagram is probably the best way to contact me. On Facebook as well. And I would say, if you can, give us a try. If you're in Milwaukee, watch the local news. Really would love if you'd join us at 5 or 10 o'clock. One of the things I'm most passionate about is trying to figure out how we can make news more accessible and more engaging for the next generation, because I think people who watch the news and people who support their local news are generally more informed citizens of their community, which I think a more informed community is a better community. And so I know the way of the world is changing and news looks a little bit different than how it did back in the day, but would love to hear from folks on why they don't watch the news, or what maybe would change their opinion on watching the news, because that's one of the things I'm most passionate about, is trying to figure out how we can reach this next generation of viewers who are who care about the world, but the way they get their information is changing. And so I hope we can change with it.
Yeah, well, and you're only seeing the world through your lens, not through the listener's lens, not through the viewer's lens, right? You see it from your side of the table. So it's really easy to overlook things, because you're only seeing it from one angle. So all that stuff is really helpful. And they can go, I assume, watch the news after the fact online as well, right? Somewhere. Where do people go for that?
So you just go to weison.com. You could watch live online. All of our shows are streamed live as they are on the air. And so if you're on your mobile device at 5 o'clock, you can turn it on. Our shows start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then go into the evening. And so our last broadcast is at 10 o'clock.
Dude, you're the man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.